Good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. Today, episode 93, Friday, February 18th, 2022. I got that right, 2022. There we go. Thank you for being here today. Today, the COVID news as usual. After that, we start a new series, Market and Customer Discovery. If you've listened to this show for any length of time, or anyone who talks about what happens in the startup world and, let's just say some of the common failure points, you know that omitting market and customer discovery is a big, big no-no. We're going to be talking about that for the next handful of weeks, starting today with our friend Kevin McLeod, who is the founder and president and CEO of C2DX, a really interesting company. After that, we're going to have a brief word from Jeff Rinvelt from Renaissance Venture Capital about their DEI UnDemo Day. And after that, time for Q&A. So looking forward to today's show, but first, the COVID metrics and vaccine distribution from healthdata.gov. This is where the CDC has been putting their state data for the last number of months. This graphic did get tainted in the last week or two, so we're not sure we're going to keep this graphic going, but this was vaccination status versus transmission in the state of Michigan. The entire graph lightened about a week ago, and we're still not quite sure why. So we don't know if the data is as good as it should be. But here's data we've been tracking for the last 2 years. Of course, new cases plummeting in the state of Michigan. That's great news. Maybe better news, the positivity rate finally down below 20%. Remember when it used to be 10% used to seem high? Well, we got all the way up to 30% during this last wave, 30% positivity, meaning 3 out of 10 tests coming back positive. But now we are on our way back down, dropping below 20. Of course, with deaths lagging infections, the deaths have not fully peaked or dropped yet. So sadly, those are still up there, just slightly higher in the 7-day average than they were during the last wave. So unfortunately, it's not the case that the deaths have been lower than in previous waves. Hospitalizations, though, dropping off very nicely, coming way back down. And this really cool graphic that the CDC just added, looking, if you like data, this is a really cool graphic because what they did is they normalized to the winter of December 20 to 21. That's 100% on the line on the left. And what it shows you is that this most recent wave we've been through, hospitalizations hit almost exactly the same level that we hit during that baseline period. Cases skyrocketed well beyond that, up to 400% of what they were. But deaths, not quite as high as that first winter. And yet, the deaths have been higher recently. The 7-day average has been higher recently than they were in April. So a little bit of sad news there. In terms of vaccinations nationwide, now looking at the nation rather than just the state, vaccinations definitely down, now dropped to about the 500,000 per day mark as they continue a downward march. Now, if we were to look 6 weeks ago at the nationwide hospitalizations, remember that this graphic, the red areas on it, indicate counties that have about enough COVID hospitalizations to fill the remaining beds in a hospital up. If a hospital needs 80 out of 100 beds full just to stay in business, then those last 15 or 20 beds are really critical for surge. And when you get 15 or 20 COVID patients, that's what makes the difference. 6 weeks ago, very few states had that. 3 weeks ago, this is what it looked like. But this week, we're heading back down into that realm where only maybe 10 states are there. So definitely heading in a good direction. Nationally, this same graph tells a very similar story. The number of infections skyrocketed this last wave with Omicron. Hospitalizations actually nationwide were higher than they were during any of the previous waves. Deaths above the summer wave, but not above the baseline period. So that's good news. A, almost a month ago, COVID hospitalizations at the University of Michigan medical system. We had 122 hospitalized patients. Here we are, February 14th, only 43 hospitalized. Spectrum Health, February 1st, we had 321 patients hospitalized. Right now, that's 258. Henry Ford Health System, back on January 31st, we had 280 inpatients with COVID. Now that's down to 135. So generally good news all around. In fact, the Associated Press just yesterday, one model is estimating that as many as, or perhaps more than 73% of the US is now immune to Omicron. If you remember, way back in the day, 70% was the number that folks were hoping would render herd immunity. I don't think anyone thinks quite the same today as we did 2 years ago, but it's certainly heartening news. They're estimating that it could be as high as 80% by mid-March. And that's going to do good things for slowing that spread down at this point. Well, that's the COVID news. We're glad that that's looking so good at the moment. And now it's time to start our new series. This is Market and Customer Discovery, a really, really important topic no matter how you slice it. And I'm joined today by my good friend Kevin McLeod, who is the founder, president, and CEO of C2DX. Kevin, welcome back to MedTech Crossroads.
Hi, Gene. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you again.
I'll
remind our audience
when I don't follow COVID news one day.
What's that again?
I said I look forward to coming on when I don't have to follow COVID news.
I know, right? I don't think we want to prognosticate, but I got to say, just at a personal level, I'm very optimistic because what we're seeing now is looking really good.
Glad to be here. Thanks.
Maybe we'll get to look back and say, you were on the last show where we talked about COVID news. That's gonna be... I want to remind the audience, though, that you did a nice deep dive of your company, C2DX. I think it was nearly a year ago on what is episode 34 of the show. So if anyone wants to take a look back at that for things that we don't cover today, please do take a look at episode 34 where Kevin was on. And as we get going, Kevin, I love your LinkedIn profile. For the last few years, it's started with this. It said, husband, father, entrepreneur, guy trying to do the right thing. And for all the years I've known you, I think that really rings true. Your latest endeavor here with C2DX, give the audience a refresher on what this is.
Sure, and thanks for the comments on LinkedIn. Trying is the operative word there. But, so C2DX, I had the pleasure of meeting Ian Bund, who I'm sure several people know or at least have heard of on the call, back in the middle of 2018, and we had an opportunity to acquire a product from Stryker, which I am a former Stryker employee, 17 years, and had gone out. I left Stryker in 2010 and had the opportunity to do some entrepreneurial things, and this was the right opportunity at the right time, where we actually acquired a product called the Stick Intracompartmental Pressure Monitor. And I was the product manager for this product back in the mid 90s. So I knew it well, I knew the space. And I got to shortcut a lot of what we're going to talk about today in market and customer discovery because I knew it quite well. So the company started in January 2019 when we closed the deal with Stryker. Had one solid year of building, ran into COVID March 20, a third month of our second year, and actually came out of it quite well, at least well enough to acquire our second product line from Stryker in January of 21, which is the T-Pump. It's a it is a temperature monitoring system and temperature, both cooling and heating for pre and post surgery and patient comfort. And then just this past January, last month, we had the opportunity to acquire a company in Memphis called Hemostatics. And they have the Hemostatics thermal scalpel, which is a scalpel that actually cuts and cauterizes at the same time. No smoke, better, more precise with surgical operative. Anytime you're in surgery, number of places that you can use the product. So we're pretty excited about it. So yeah, it's been a busy 3 years, 3 acquisitions. We've gone from starting with 6 of us to just over 40 customers now, or I should say employees now, about 4,000 customers. So we've been
Wow.
busy.
That's an amazing ramp. And what's so interesting, just to make sure the audience is clear on this, we often talk about companies that are, oh, we're developing a product, or, when you talk to big companies, they're acquiring small companies with products. You guys are almost approaching this from that norm, almost entirely backwards. Many of the products that you acquire have actually been at big companies. Let's make sure we're clear on that aspect.
Yeah, it's so looking at our model really is based on looking for opportunities where we can enhance the product. So in this is part of our discovery when we're looking at opportunities. So we want to know if there's a little bit more room to grow by just putting some seasoned professionals on the product, both internally and externally, meaning our operations and sales side are full of veterans from the space, number of them former Stryker, who know how to market, how to distribute, and how to manage a supply chain inside the medical device space, which allows us to bring on these products that have revenue. So versus most startups who start, first couple of years, if 2 to 5 years, depending on the product, with no revenue, just trying to develop a product. We have the exact opposite problem where we're taking on, with Stick, we had 3,000 customers day one. How do you manage it? How do you move forward? So it is really opposite as you described, but different challenges nonetheless. But the team is phenomenal, and you can go to our website and just look at the talent and the history we have. So it just makes a difference for it. But going forward, we want to keep doing the same. We're looking for that another divestiture acquisition. As well as now we've got some organic projects that we're trying to build internally. So keeps us busy. And again, towards your topic of the day, we spend a lot of time looking at markets and talking to customers.
Well, it's a fascinating business model. And one of the reasons I thought it would be fun to start this market and customer discovery series with you, Kevin, is I had to sort of put myself in your shoes as best I could mentally and think to myself, it's a very unique niche to take a product that may be languishing at a large company, has sales, it's got it, but it's not the place where they're able to put a lot of focus, and to take that responsibility on that. As I thought to myself, I thought, wow, you've actually really got to know your market and your customers in a way that's maybe deeper often than a lot of startups do. So as we go in that direction and start to think about market and customer discovery, let's let you set the stage for us. Because you've been part of Stryker, you've been part of startups, we've gotten to know each other through some of those. And now with C2DX working in this sort of a mid-sized place, how would you define market and customer discovery for us? What are the important highlights of that from your perspective?
Yeah, it's so topic near and dear to my heart, as you might imagine. But I think it's evolved over the years in the medical device space, not just because I've worked for large companies and small companies, but the market continues to shift, and we ultimately, it's not one size fits all. It's the markets. The products, depending on where you come in. I mean, you've got new concepts, which you'll talk in further episodes about really deep diving on a concept from the OR, for instance, and trying to decide if there's a space. Or there's current products that are looking for new uses. So you use it in orthopedics, can you use it in neuro, can you use it in general? And then there's products like we've looked into, which just need more attention and are able to pull them out of, by divestiture, pull them out of larger companies. So it's really looking at that macro level and then bringing it down to the micro level with, then going to the customers, the end users, and asking if this makes sense, really trying to bolster your theory and have the people who may one day use it and buy it, make your theory stronger and support your developing a company or developing a product line. For us, it's really trying to define who the customers are. And historically, historically, meaning back in when I started at Stryker, a lot of times a physician, he or she would have an idea and we would get it made. It was that simple. There was a place for it. Nobody questioned it. They bought it. No one asked us what the price would be. And, it was really pretty straightforward. Today, it's it's ultimately the physician, whether they're diagnosing or treating what the product is marked for, the patient floors, the OR, the ER, materials management, biomedical departments, central sterile, all these groups have to be come along for the ride. And there's a lot of players, and the biggest piece of this is the patient at the end, and making sure that that it makes sense, it will do no harm, and that that we can afford to pay for it. So, when we're looking at these today, we've got this bent towards something that needs more attention. We've got a lot of experienced people. We're starting to build a sales force that understands where we're positioning these products, and it makes it pretty straightforward where we're going. Now, finding these products that have revenue, that have a future, is not easy. I mean, we've looked at over 300 concepts in 3 years, and we've bought 3. So it's a tough find, but ultimately it's really looking at it from the big picture in the market, in the macro level, and then drilling it down to the customers.
It's really fascinating because you've found a place there where the execution really matters. And when I say it that way, I almost regret the words, because execution always matters. And sometimes folks don't understand how much the actual execution for the end customers drives the acceptance of the product.
Yeah, I think, it's at the end of the day, I mean, just because you can invent it or patent it or market it, build it, market it, doesn't mean you can sell it. And, there's been, thousands of examples where it's a brilliant idea that's patented, and there's a bunch of products sitting on a shelf, but they just couldn't get it sold. So trying to really mitigate the risks along the process of understanding, A, the market first, and then B, the customers, and then how you're going to reach those customers. It's a science, and it's got plenty of art in it. And I think what we have in our organization, at least, we've surrounded ourselves with talented people who understand this and who have done it in the past, but are also very, they realize the fact that this continues to evolve, and this is not going to continue to be that one size fits all strategy. We're going to have to adapt and learn how to do it. And then, doing it all at a price point that, our current healthcare system can afford. And which, it's every day there's some challenges built into this, but ultimately keeping the focus on what the customer need and what the product does for the patient helps you keep the focus, which is why we love the medical device industry, right? I mean, it's at the end of the day, you're changing people's lives in one way or another.
Yeah, and the ability to do that depends on so many factors. So it's really cool. Also, when you've got a product that people do value, and maybe it's not getting the attention it should, to be able to bring that back to people. Well, Kevin, if we think here about setting the stage for market and customer discovery, can you tell us a good case, bad case sort of a story, maybe both for C2DX and also for anyone out there who's doing new product development in general? What happens when you do customer and market discovery well? And what happens, maybe the bad story too, what would happen if we didn't do customer and market discovery well?
I don't want to talk too much about that end of it, just to jinx ourselves. But I think ultimately it's the looking in the mirror and having the reflection of who the organization is and who do you want to be. So for us, so far, the stick monitor, it's our first product that we acquired from Stryker. We knew what it did, and fortunately, and there's probably just a handful of people worldwide who understood it, but the product has a unique spot inside a hospital. It's in probably, if it isn't in every ER in the country, it was at one point. So as a startup, we knew that this would give us access. So having a company start from zero with access to 3,000 to 4,000 customers day one, is you can't put a value on that. There's no amount of money you could raise to guarantee that the way the stick is done for us. So we literally, even during COVID, we were able to access our customers because of the importance and the place this product had in it. So, the success wasn't because of the amount of revenue we were gaining. It wasn't because of the deal we struck necessarily, but both of those were good. But what made a difference is understanding the place in the market that particular product held. And it was much more than features and benefits. So, I can give you, one bad case or something that we experienced in the past is that right product, wrong fit. And so there's opportunities that we've passed on that are going to be great opportunities. It's just not for C2DX. And what that required us to do is to start getting into that micro level and understanding on the macro level, this is a great opportunity and someone's going to do well here. But on the micro level, it's not our call pattern. And we stress when we look at these opportunities, time and effort of our sales folks, because we don't want them chasing a lot of things that they can't do inside a hospital, for instance. Hemostatics is a perfect fit for us because it gets us into the OR and it allows us to also sell our other products while we're there. And so we can be more of a service to our sales reps as well as our customers because we're there on site. So we've passed, we've actually gone pretty far down the road on some things and then realized it's just not going to be worth our time and effort going forward.
That kind of insight is so valuable. Of course, you've honed that in your years through various parts of the medical device industry. I think a lot of times when people come to the topic of customer discovery, they think to themselves, well, I would use this, so it's definitely going to sell. And you're bringing a bit more nuance to that, like, well, yeah, it might be a good idea, but is it right for us? Can we address this? All these sorts of things. Really, how big is the bite?
Yeah, and we can tell you, working inside the operating room, it's not like buying a car, right? You can't just go drive it and know. And even developing a car, I'd have a heck of a lot better idea how to develop a car knowing that I've driven them. When you're in the OR, those tools are never in your hands at the moment of impact, right? So being able to diagnose what you're hearing, and right away you want to believe it, because you can't feel it and you can't live the experience, but getting in front of as many people as you can who have that experience can help you really define whether or not there's an opportunity here. And that's the goal of the marketing and R&D organizations, is really vet this thing out. And then you take it, can you patent it? Can you manufacture it at the right price point that they'll end up acquiring? Because I promise you, when you're talking to a physician, and this isn't meant to offend anybody, but I've met very few physicians who understand what cost means in a product. But I've met 99% of my materials management folks could tell me that, and 99% of my physicians couldn't. So, but how does that match up, and making sure you're touching on that, both sides of that. And it's important going forward to include all of those pieces in there.
Well, you guys have a unique model for doing this inside of your access to hospitals and health systems and things like that. I think we have some slides here that I'm hoping you can take us through. But before we do that, just a word more about that stick that you guys have had on the market for the last few years. You got some pretty fun publicity here.
Yeah, it's what happened. You hire talented people, and they work. They work to help with the organization. But Sarah Hollingsworth and Tricia Dunham, our marketing team, got the opportunity to have the product showcased. Actually, it's just in Canada at the moment, is my understanding. You can't watch it yet in the United States. So I believe Tricia figured out a way to.
I think in March. I heard that season 3 is coming out in March. Yes.
Yeah. So it was one of those unique opportunities, and they showcased the stick monitor so well in that episode that we got a great screenshot now for our marketing.
That's really fun. Yeah, we don't see a lot of medical products make it onto national TV. So congratulations on that.
Yeah, not unless it says Stryker. They've done quite well in positioning their brand.
That's really cool. Well, take us through this process, Kevin. You've got some slides here. You've got some really interesting insights into how you guys think about assessing the market and going forward when you're evaluating a new idea.
Yeah, so this is a screenshot of just the early, talking about the macro versus micro level and really getting into it. So these are the these steps are the first steps in our product development cycle. And Rick Heiser and Ben Burnham, Rick runs R&D and Ben runs sales and marketing. It's their job at the beginning of these projects to make sure that there's an end game. And you have a number of gates in this product development cycle, and this is not unique. This just happens to be the way we're setting it up. But a lot of this has been honed over 30 years of experience. But ultimately, really understanding how it fits in segmentation strategy and making sure that we feel good about the fit inside C2DX. Then trying to drill down on that customer, and what do we need to know? What does the biomedical department have to know to be able to repair the product, and what is the opportunity, the price points, et cetera. And then the customer insight and brand positioning is really us developing our story. How are they going to use it? What are the hot points that we would bullet on a brochure, for instance, or on the website? Taking a tough, competitively, what's out there? Are we by ourselves? Most likely not. So what are their stories? What do we need to watch out for? What do we need to compete against? Environmental assessment is really our framing of everything else. What's going to go into the sales of the product? Everything from, are you able to go into a materials management room, get an appointment, are you able to walk it into the hospital? Are they going to be able to sterilize it appropriately? What's the waste that's involved with the product? So really taking a look at the very high level, what the product's imprint would be in the hospital and in the system. And then looking at clinical evidence, and if it doesn't exist, where are we going to build it? We would prefer to have every product we launch have some clinical evidence prior to marketing it, which when you're acquiring a product, you don't necessarily get to have that say. Most of the products, both products we've acquired has had that clinical evidence, and most do. But there's some that don't, believe it or not, still that 510K didn't require a clinical study, for instance, but we like to make sure we're positioned well there. Reimbursement, I've talked about it a couple of times already. I think this is not this far down the list because it's that less important than the first bullet. Ultimately, this is part of building into the price point and whether or not this can be marketed. Again, just because you can make it doesn't mean you can sell it, and the reimbursement's a big part of that. And then we just get into the actual, this is really getting into the marketing side and the sales information that we're going to get to our sales and marketing team's hands to actually start selling the product. So, by that time, and this is still early on in the process, as I mentioned, but, we have to be building our story through this entire process. What I do think is it's not unique to us necessarily, but it's something we certainly pride ourselves on, is this is a sales and marketing, regulatory and quality, research and development, finance, everyone's involved in this process. So it's just not marketing and R&D throwing something over a wall. It's Ryan Eggleston, who runs our RAQA organization, is just as involved in this as our CFO Jen, who's making sure she's abreast of all that's going on. So ultimately, it fits because those same questions and pressure points are going to come up in a hospital: cost, regulatory approval, quality of a product, serviceability. So we try to capture that right away in our process and really try to shoot holes in the concept or the product that we're looking at. And if it makes it through, then we're on our way. Then we just have the little task of actually designing it and building it. But ultimately, we know we're headed in the right direction. And then directionally, if you want to go to the next slide, this is how we're starting to drill it down for C2DX. And there's some opportunities here that really give us a chance to decide where we would want to go and how we'd want to get there. And so that we look at this by location. And then if you go to the next slide, it shows you by specialty. And then, so same concept. So essentially, if there's the more color there is, the better fit for us. And then the last slide really gets down to our priorities. Where do we want to go? And again, this is our fit, and this actually evolves. Matter of fact, I can tell you some of this has changed since I sent it to Gene. But where we're going as far as actually physically locating our sales organization, what specialties they may call on in that space, and then what's the disease management? Where are we spending our time and efforts that would bring us the quickest and best payback?
I want anyone who's ever thinking about market and customer discovery, what Kevin just said about all the factors that they consider. I mean, that's something to put a study on right there, because for every new product development effort, you wish that the founders would get that deep into it, because the actual use, how it fits onto the floor, how, all these elements, they're so critical, and you guys have understood that for existing products, and that's just part of your routine.
Yeah, it's 30 years of being in the space. I think what's really neat about our organization is that we have, from day one, the first four of us, we had 120 years experience. All happened to be at Stryker. Coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, but ultimately, we honed a practice that, especially when we started at the organization, that company was phenomenal at this early stage market development, and now they're phenomenal at a lot more things. But ultimately, it's honed us in, and it's, these startup companies, we don't have a ton of time. And we have to take some risks, and it's really just starting to calculate them and making sure we feel comfortable in it. So, we have made some missteps in our 3 years. There's no question, but we're mitigating them along the way, and we don't get that far. We're not afraid to tell you when we're failing. It's pretty quick. We pride ourselves on being a very transparent organization in every facet of our business, and part of it is looking ourselves in the mirror and saying we're going in the wrong direction and quickly changing it.
That's the whole fail fast thing. I want to take you back into some of the thoughts and the strategy of the things that you acquire, but we have one more slide here, I think, that you sent, which was acquisition criteria, and I think you are always looking for new acquisitions.
Yeah, So if anyone knows anything that is 10 million plus in revenue, it's in the market with call pattern in the operating room, et cetera. We're looking. Yeah, I think our strategy has been very, very clear from day one, and we have a phenomenal partnership with Plymouth Growth in the team there, and they're pushing us to continue to build, and hopefully by the end of this year we'll have yet another opportunity in front of us.
That's really cool. Very, very cool. I know you and I talked a little bit about where some of these opportunities come from. One that I found interesting was that if an acquisition happens, sometimes not all the products that are being acquired by the large company were necessarily of interest. So sometimes these are products that have been on the market for a while with a big company, but not always. Tell us more about some of these paths.
Yeah, so we've talked to a few different companies that are in the process of billion-dollar acquisitions, where there's products either coming from the acquired company or that exist in the acquirer that they will either no longer pursue, maybe duplicative. In one obviously the one's better than the other as far as in their eyes that they want to keep. So we've looked at a few of those, and it's from the acquirer side on the flip side. So the company that may be pulling those out, so people like us, it's an interesting conversation, because the last thing in the planet I want to do is compete with Stryker. So if they're out making an acquisition and then they're peeling off a product, I want to make sure that product's got some uniqueness that I don't have to worry about competing with that machine every day. So it is a delicate dance, but there are some products there that are parallel, but are different, and the difference may be who you're selling it to, et cetera. So then having that ability to look at them and evaluate whether it's an opportunity for us has really been unique. And fortunately for us, there's not a lot of people doing what we're doing. So we've gotten inside a lot of larger organizations, so that a lot of them are thinking about C2DX and that concept that they have. So we're hearing more and more about these opportunities. So And it's just not that simple, because it meets all the, everything that was on that list you just put up. Doesn't mean we're automatically a good fit, but it's certainly a good start.
Well, you say it's unique and rare, and that's a great thing. 100% of a niche market has never been a bad business strategy. So our hats go off to you for that. When you're talking, Kevin, to a existing customer, and for those who are thinking about market and customer discovery, I want you to listen really closely to Kevin's answer here because you're talking to folks who are in the industry, they're using this product that you're thinking about acquiring. There's things that you ask them. There's questions that you want to know about their use of the product before you think you might want to go into this business. What kinds of things, what's a conversation like that look like, sound like, feel like to you?
Hemostatics is a perfect example. So this is a 17-year-old technology, maybe even 20 years old now. And it's a thermal scalpel, so it cuts and coagulates at the same time. Anybody who at least has spent any time in the OR thinks, "God, that seems like a great idea. Why haven't I heard of it?" Which is the exact reaction we had: is why haven't we seen this product before? So, we asked for a list of their customers very early on, and we wanted to go talk to them. And the list of customers was, UPMC, Johns Hopkins, Stanford, all these major institutions. So the very first question we asked the physicians is, why isn't everybody using this? Why just you? What makes, is this so difficult to use and it can only be in the best hands? What are the reasons? And I'm sure Brad Beal, the president of Hemostatics, who's now part of our organization, won't get too mad at me for saying this, but their answer was all the same. These guys aren't marketing it. These guys don't have a sales organization. So, you finding, ultimately the right question can lead to a lot. And, we just continue to explore that path. If it really was just paying attention to it and putting a sales organization around it, we're a perfect fit. And everyone told us the same thing. There's not, and they even got more detailed to why they thought they could do more. That's those understanding the space and the environment can shortcut a lot of steps, and going right to the proverbial horse's mouth here and asking the question made it really easy for us.
Well, it's amazing because you can actually get the information out of those users if you're willing to do the footwork, which is of course a very common theme when you talk customer and market discovery, and we'll be talking about this in future weeks as well. A huge part of it is just getting out there and doing the legwork with the people who would be using it and buying it and would have the most critical opinions on it. I remember way back in the day, we had developed a system, and the system had gotten acquired. And then years later, I was walking through a lab and saw one of our systems there. And it was my baby. And I said, "Well, what do you think about the system?" And the lab director said, "Oh yeah, I don't know if we really liked it very much." And your heart just sort of falls. Like, what happened wrong? But I'll ask my lab manager. We'll find out what the real story is. And he brought the lab manager in, and the lab manager said, "Oh, we love it. It's the greatest thing. It's just that when it got acquired, we couldn't get any consumables anymore because the acquirer couldn't provide it." Like you were saying, the challenge of providing a product when you now have 3,000 customers on day one. And it's those kinds of conversations that provide the nuance of how the customer experience is actually happening, or how it would happen. So when people are doing customer discovery, really understanding what are those dynamics inside the use environment, that gave me a little glimpse that they're completely invaluable.
Yeah, I think there's so many things that can lead to that. And, at the end of the day, our organization's focused around the patient and the customer. And I think from, the stick monitor is pretty unique. And if we don't ship that disposable, people can lose limbs. And it's, for us, and we, sort of a lot of companies like to have an origin story. Part of ours is, me unloading the FedEx truck after getting the delivery from Stryker 2 days after we closed the deal and having to ship a product overnight to Seattle. for a patient to get tested the next morning. And that's, we have to operate that way, which means we have to have a lot of inventory. And especially when we're moving, we moved that product from Puerto Rico to Kalamazoo, the manufacturing. So you better be sure that you have enough inventory to cover you until you get that line up and running. So yeah, there's a lot of, it certainly helps. My team is, I could not ask for a better team of people. And our partners are great too. Jim Metzger, who's probably on the call. Their organization has meant the world to us, and they operate, almost as one. So making sure that you have those partners. And, we're currently moving another product from China to Kalamazoo with Jim. And, those are big steps for small companies. So you better have the right partners.
Right partners. Yeah, of course, Jim Metzger from Keystone Solutions Group, great company. They're on the west side of Michigan. Kevin, one of the things that I remember you telling me is that a question you don't always ask is, how many of these are you going to buy? And that struck me. Why would you not ask that question of the potential or the current users?
So most of them don't know. It's, so we would rather look at, surgical volumes, for instance, in looking at the gross market, and that's just like asking the price point. I kind of brought that up earlier, is no one, ultimately the physician, the end user typically has very little knowledge of that. Most physicians might not even know how many of a single procedure they do a year. So I think it's hard to find that person who knows what they may purchase. When we do ask that question, it's usually a materials management, because they actually do have the volumes in front of them. So it's, again, knowing on the micro level, knowing who your customers are, because it's not one individual. If you get, a physician in the operating room, he or she may know the bulk of your answers, but if biomedical department can't figure out how to fix it and doesn't want to deal with it, you got a problem. And if you can't partner well with them on the service side, which we do, so I think you just have to make sure you're touching every point there and making sure you understand. So getting into such finite detail with the end user really doesn't lead you to the right story necessarily. Might not be wrong, but it's not all of it.
Yeah, they don't necessarily know. You've got to get to that through other indicators that you have access to.
Right.
It's such cool stuff. I do have one more question for you, but before I ask that, I want to say to our audience, if you've got any questions for Kevin, please feel free to raise a hand in the Zoom room there. We'd love to get that question to Kevin. Here's one from our friend Ken Spencer.
Yeah, hi Kevin. Thank you very much.
Let's see if we can
get episode 34 also.
Can you hear us, Ken?
Yes. So can you hear me, Kevin?
I can.
Oh, are there any FDA guardrails when you look at an acquisition or a product or something like that? If you have to add to its uniqueness and it requires you to go, say, through another round of FDA approvals, do you look on that as a plus or a minus if it adds to that uniqueness?
Can I answer yes? So here's what I would say. We actually, I think I can say it. We're doing this right now with hemostatics. There's some upgrades we need to do to the product, and it will be, so we'll have to get a new 510K issued. But we know that it's going to it'll affect our future tremendously. So we're willing to go and take that effort and do the R&D piece up front. Another example, sort of on the other side of that, is that the stick monitor, part of the reason a lot of companies are looking to divest right now is the standards in the EU changing, and the MDR versus MDD, and Stryker had stopped the process with the stick monitor in the EU, which meant the minute we bought the product, we weren't going to be able to sell it in Europe. And there was a significant amount of their business in Europe that we knew we were going to give up day one and have to go back through the process, which, by the way, we're still going through 3 years later. So, that was the opposite side. That's where we knew we were going to have to give up a little of the market. Now, did we know it was going to be for 3 years? No. We thought it'd be 12 to 18 months. So it's extended much beyond that. But it's regulatory is always hanging over your head in this space, and understanding that the acquisition, whether it's a brand new product or a 20-year-old product, there's ramifications. It's a good question.
Yeah, great question, Ken. Great answer, Kevin. That's awesome. Feel free to raise a hand if you have other questions from the audience. But Kevin, as we come towards the end here, I think your novel approach to things, it really caused me to ask this question to myself, which is, wow, look, you're getting new life out of products that had been neglected. Is this the new model? Is this where every company should be? I mean, should we have these huge companies, and what's their use if they can't pay attention and find all the great customer service that's needed for a particular product line like this? And I thought the answer that you had given me was really profound.
Yeah, do you remember what it was? No, I'm just kidding. I think ultimately they can pay attention to these products, and they in some instances they may have had, if you have a 200-person sales force and you got 20 people paying attention to it, it's not enough for these organizations. So they're looking at multiples way beyond what this product brings in. But yet the regulatory and the quality side of this is the same investment, whether it's a $10 million product line or a $10 billion product line. You still have to have the regulatory approval. You still have to have the quality behind it. You still have to have customer service picking up the phone. So there's an investment that has to be made. And if you're Stryker, you'd rather do it, for something that's bringing in much larger revenue than some of these smaller product lines. So, should other companies like us exist? No, because that means I'd have less opportunity. But in the big picture, probably. I mean, there's some opportunity there, and especially with people with niche experience, and the fact that ultimately companies succeed not because of the products, but the people. And we were fortunate to be able to pull, from a talented organization like Stryker, with people who had left the company. Two of our founders were retired when they, first employees. So when they came back in, and so we were very fortunate to have an area where we could hire talented people. We were all friends before, so we knew each other. We knew what the talent was, and then being able to bring in products that we understood very well has really made for the recipe. And we have a great organization, and we've hired people who believe in it and have captured it. So, it's more than the product as always. It's the people, and being able to make sure that we keep that customer focus. But, with all that said, there's opportunities out there. And we see products every day we say no to that somebody else may find interesting. We've even talked about starting separate companies based on some of our experience, and because it wouldn't fit with our own organization and take us, it's a distraction. So I do think it's unique. I don't think it's going away. And it's all going to come down to the talent around it.
Yeah, well, it's a phenomenal business model. Certainly something that I don't think any of us have heard about before, and so glad that it's becoming a huge success for you guys. And thank you for being here today to talk with us about market and customer discovery, because I think the way that we wanted to set this series up as we talk in future weeks about it, what you guys are doing, you really, really understand where a product needs to land. And the kind of questions that you're asking and getting answers to and making your decisions based on are actually the kind of things that even new product development needs to be thinking about. So I think this has just been a phenomenal place to start this discussion, this longer discussion that we're having, because you guys have really put a study on that, and you're turning a profit on that study.
Yeah, I think it's actually. Thanks for having me. It's something that's near and dear, and it has been since my early days at Stryker. And I think starting here would be, especially. I think Jonathan's next.
2 weeks
coming up.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, he's at almost the other end of the spectrum, but doing the same thing. So I think being able to contrast those two would be pretty cool for you guys. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, Kevin, great to talk with you. Thanks for being with us today.
You bet.
Great. Well, next up, I want to welcome my friend, colleague, and advisor, Jeff Rinvelt, who is one of the partners with Renaissance Venture Capital. He's also an advisory board member to MedTech Crossroads, along with Denise Graves from MEDC, Jen Baird from Fifth Eye, and Dave Brophy, of course, a legend in the investment community locally. Jeff, welcome back to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. And that was great conversation with Kevin. And I'm proud to say that actually Renaissance is an indirect investor in his company. So it was great to get an update on it. So
Congratulations. It was like a little mini board meeting right there.
it was fantastic. So
We love it. Well, Jeff, you guys are always doing really, really cool things. And first of all, from the perspective of MedTech Crossroads, thank you for putting heart and soul into it. You've been great in advising on this. And we've got some cool things coming up, especially in the world of finance that we're going to be talking about in future months. So thank you for your participation there. But you've got an event coming up that you'd like to share with us, and I think we'll advance slides here to the next one.
yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about Renaissance for the people that don't know us yet, and I think most people on the call do. But Renaissance Venture Capital is a Michigan-based fund of funds that invest in top-tier venture capital funds. And some of the companies we invest are like C2DX. We're now at over 280 million in size, and Renaissance provides strong financial returns to investors by connecting those investors to innovation across the nation and helping attract venture capital in Michigan. So if we can go to the next slide, I can sort of talk about one of the things that we have done, and this is the 10th UnDemo Day. And UnDemo Day is a free event that matches our network of over 200 funds with promising startups that raising in the next 6 to 18 months. So this being our 10th UnDemo Day, we're trying something new this time. And it's not just Michigan companies, we're opening it up to all the Midwest diverse founders and CEOs. So this one is actually more DEI focused, and we're focusing on just diverse founders and CEOs. So besides the one-on-one meetings, which is always the heart of it, and basically connecting those 200 venture capital firms with promising startups, we actually have a bunch of people that are helping us out at this virtual free event. We have Invest Detroit with training. We have Foley and Lardner on the legal side. We have Ernst & Young on tax accounting side. And then we have Amy Sell Talent, which is helping us on the recruiting side of things too. So if you want to go to the next slide, we can talk about some of the ways to apply. So the applications are now open, and they actually close on March 7th. We actually find the best applications through our local accelerators and entrepreneurial support organizations. So we probably, if you talk to anybody like Spark or TechTown, or even in the Midwest, there's a bunch of partners that we have. So you may want to contact them, and we're trying to get the word out through them. So those are the best places to apply. But if you don't, you can actually go directly to the UnDemo app, which is that first URL basically on there. You can put my name down as a referral. But we'll have a bunch of training that will come out and have the side of it. But if you're not, basically you can, if you want more information, you can contact me. I'll be in the waiting room. You can also contact Vince, who's on that email is up there. And actually, if you're an entrepreneurial support organization, or if you're just a community member, we actually just opened the applications for the event too, and that's at that last URL. So we're hoping to have a great bunch of companies and make a bunch of deals that happen sort of April 27th. For all the Midwest.
That's great. April 27th is the event, and I think you said March 7th was the deadline. Is that correct?
That is correct. So we're coming really up on the application side. So applications are open now, and hopefully people are filtering into it.
That's great, Jeff. We really appreciate you bringing that to everybody's attention. We'll bring that slide back up one more time here, full screen, just to make sure everyone has a chance. There are the addresses that you can make application at if you fit the criteria and you're interested in the next UnDemo Day. That's so cool. Well, Jeff, in the last couple of minutes that we've got here, I got to put you on the spot for your reflections, because as you mentioned, Renaissance you're an investor in investors. I mean, VCs are often your investments, and when you think of this whole topic of market and customer discovery, and as long as we're here at the outset, reflecting on Kevin's thoughts, things that you heard that you liked.
Yeah, he's had a unique experience because he has connections to all these, great customers effectively. So the startups that I'm usually talking to don't have access to that, or they're people coming out of university, especially working with, iCore and, Jonathan Fay. I've worked a lot basically on that side of things. So that's more my experience. So just understanding if they understand the journey of their product and understanding exactly who the customer is and getting access to them is the hardest part for them side of it. And that was the biggest thing for my, understanding and how to understand the device market, is that you've got tons of different customers, and any one of those can sort of derail it or make it a bad product as a VC investment. So you can have, the end user, you can have the surgeon, you can have the purchaser, you can have the, all these, you can have the FDA basically can shut you down. So there are tons of different customers, and making sure you're talking to each one of those and have access to the right person. That's why Kevin's team is just so amazing. And if you don't have access to that, I strongly will urge you to sort of partner with other people that can get you the voice of all of those customers, because each one of them can make it a bad investment for your time and for a venture, for a venture firm basically side of it.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think by the time we're done with this whole dialogue about customer and market discovery, people are going to be going, okay, I get the importance. I understand a lot of the questions I should be asking. And I think the resounding question is going to be, how do I get that kind of access? How do I sit in those seats? How do I sit in front of those people and make that? And that's going to become a real important part of the discussion for folks. Well, Jeff, thanks for being here.
A lot of great resources too. That's the fun part. So, Jonathan's going to be a great resource after this. You're going to have Kevin. You're going to have, access to a bunch of different people that hopefully they can access. So I think there's going to be a lot of learning going on.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun time. Well, I appreciate your thoughts today. Thanks for letting me put you on the spot as always, but you're just such a resource, and we really appreciate your contributions to the community through Renaissance and also directly to MedTech Crossroads by advising.
Perfect. Thanks for having me.
Great. Well, that brings us down to about a minute and a half left till the 3 o'clock hour. If there's any further questions or events that you want to announce, you are welcome to pop on here, raise a hand, tell us about it, what's going on in the community or with your organization. There's always time for that. And if we don't see any hands here, we'll close it down here in just a second. We do see one hand up. It's our good friend Ken Spencer. Ken, you're live.
Yes, thanks, Gene. So if you were aware, the Weil
let's try again. There we go. Now we've got you. Sorry, Ken, go ahead.
Sorry. So as you know, MCIRC is now the Weil Institute over there, named after Max Harry Weil, the father of emergency medicine. But in any case, our 2022 Grand Challenge Severe TBI action is starting, and March 3rd is the kickoff event. And this year we have over $1 million to award to companies, both new and existing awardees in the past. So I would just urge people to go to the Weil Institute page at U of M and please register for that kickoff event on March 3rd.
That's great, Ken. March 3rd, over $1 million being awarded the Max Weil Institute, now the name of MCIRC. Thank you, Ken. We've also got our friend Sandra Cochran over from WMed. Let's see if we can get her live here.
Hi, how are you?
Good to hear you, Sandra. How are you doing today?
I'm great, thank you. A really interesting session today. Thanks for having it. Just want to let everyone know that next Tuesday on February 22nd, our good friends at BBC will be hosting a webinar on commercialization planning for SBIR, STTR grants, and the Innovation Center is a proud host of that. So would like to encourage everyone, if you are going after federal funding through the SBIR program, go to bbcetc.com and look for that training program on February 22nd. It begins at 10 a.m.
February 22nd, of course. Yeah, the good folks from BBC. If you want to get grant funding, they are the people to talk to. Thank you for hosting that, Sandra.
My pleasure.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for those announcements, everybody. Great stuff there. I'm not seeing any more hands up right now, and we are right at the 3 o'clock hour. So we are looking forward to seeing you next week on MedTech Crossroads, when we will be continuing the discussion. I'm actually going to have two guests sitting right here. We're going to get to use our studio for the first time. From MyLead Consulting, they will be talking about the customer and market discovery process from their perspective, and we will look forward to that next week on MedTech Crossroads. Thanks so much for being here. Bye-bye.